Imagine the sound of a heavy steel door slamming shut. Then silence. No clock. No windows. No human voice. Within days, your brain realizes nobody is coming. So, to keep from going dark, it begins to rewrite reality. It starts with a whisper in the corner of the room. A whisper that belongs to you, but sounds like someone else. This is the reality of solitary confinement. It is not just physical imprisonment. It is a slow, structural demolition of the human mind. We like to think of our consciousness as something independent, an internal flame that burns safely inside us, untouched by the outside world. We believe that if we were stripped of everything, our phones, our friends, our daily comforts, we would still remain exactly who we are. But psychology proves otherwise. Your mind is not a self-sustaining engine. It is a mirror. It requires the friction of the real world, the sights, the sounds, and the interactions just to know that it exists. When you break that mirror, the pieces turn sharp. Deep inside your brain is the command center for your memory and your sense of space. Under normal conditions, this area is incredibly active. It constantly creates new pathways, adapts to new environments, and records your life. But this engine requires a steady diet of information. It needs changing landscapes, unpredictable events, conversations with others, and constant sensory feedback. It requires the world around you to be alive. When you place a human being into a 6x9 concrete box, that diet stops instantly. Your environment becomes perfectly, agonizingly frozen. The gray concrete walls never change. The artificial light remains entirely flat, casting no shadows to show the passage of time. The floor is always flat, always cold. Within 48 hours, your brain senses this total vacuum. It operates on a strict rule of survival. Use it or lose it. When your mental pathways are no longer forced to navigate an unpredictable world, they begin to wither from disuse. Consider the case of Terry Anderson. In 1985, the American journalist was kidnapped in Beirut and spent nearly 7 years in absolute isolation, often chained in small, windowless rooms. He later recalled that within weeks, his mind began to systematically drop its anchor points. He could no longer visually map the layout of his childhood home. The brain was cutting power to his past just to keep his core survival systems online. Studies on long-term isolation confirm exactly what Anderson experienced. Prolonged emptiness causes key networks in the brain to physically waste away. Your internal maps fade. Your ability to understand physical space breaks down first. People trapped in isolation often report feeling intensely dizzy, as if they are falling inside a room they can cross in just 3 steps. Then, the destruction goes deeper. Your brain begins to erase the memories stored within those failing systems. It blurs the faces of the people you used to love. It smudges the details of your youth. You don't just lose your surroundings. You lose your history. You become a ghost in your own body. As the brain weakens internally, the body reacts with absolute violence. Human beings are built to be social. This isn't an emotional statement about being lonely. It is a hard truth written into our genetics. For thousands of years, being separated from the tribe meant certain death. If you were cast out into the wilderness alone, you were prey. You could not survive the night. Because of this ancient programming, your nervous system interprets absolute isolation not as a quiet break, but as an immediate, life-threatening crisis. This biological reality was lived out by Albert Woodfox. He spent an unprecedented 43 years in a 6x9-foot cell in Louisiana's infamous Angola prison. Decades after his release, Woodfox described how his body existed in a permanent state of high alert, experiencing sudden, unprovoked panic attacks that felt like a heart attack. The science explains why. The moment the cell door stays shut too long, your brain's internal alarm system goes off. It rings a bell that cannot be turned off. It floods your body with a continuous, toxic wave of cortisol and adrenaline. Your blood pressure rises. Your heart rate accelerates. Normally, adrenaline is useful. It gives you an immediate surge of energy to fight an enemy or run from danger. But in a concrete box, there's nothing to fight. There's nowhere to run. Because the alarm never turns off, your body stays trapped in a permanent state of emergency. It redirects all its energy into short-term survival, leaving your immune system to slowly collapse. You enter a state of permanent, quiet panic. You become hypersensitive. Every tiny sound, the low hum of a light bulb, the distant click of a guard's shoe on the floor, strikes your nerves like a lightning bolt. You are entirely safe from physical harm, yet your body is entirely convinced you are being hunted by a predator. It is a torture device built completely out of your own survival instincts. Human sanity requires an anchor, and that anchor is time. We map our lives by the rising and setting of the sun, the shift from day to night, the rhythm of waking and sleeping. In solitary confinement, Time is weaponized by making it invisible. Without natural light, your internal biological clock completely shatters. Your brain no longer knows when to make you sleep or when to wake you up. The boundary between day and night dissolves into a single, endless, gray blur. People in total isolation quickly become completely lost in time. You might sleep for 14 hours, wake up, and believe only 20 minutes have passed. Or you might lie awake for what feels like days, trapped in a single afternoon. When your brain loses its grip on time, it loses its grip on cause and effect. The past, the present, and the future begin to bleed into one another. You lose the ability to organize your own thoughts. You cannot plan. You cannot look forward. You are trapped in a perpetual, agonizing now. This collapse breaks the human spirit faster than physical pain ever could. It strips away the concept of an ending. When you cannot measure time, a sentence of weeks feels like eternity.
But the true horror occurs when the brain attempts to repair itself. The human mind cannot tolerate a vacuum. It is hardwired to seek patterns, to look for data, to find meaning in the quiet. If you do not give it a reality, it will invent one out of pure desperation. In 2009, an American hiker named Sarah Shourd was captured near the Iranian border and placed in solitary confinement for 410 days. She wrote about how the silence eventually became so deafeningly loud that she could hear the rhythmic thudding of her own blood vessels. To locate a signal in the sensory void, her brain turned its internal volume up to the absolute maximum. It began to mistake its own internal static for the outside world. She started hallucinating a specific, glowing light on her cell wall and heard phantom screams that she couldn't distinguish from reality. At first, you might see small sparks of light, geometric shapes, or shifting colors floating across the gray walls. Then the patterns solidify. You see insects crawling across the floor that vanish when you reach for them. You see shadows pacing in the corner of your eye. The auditory part of your brain follows suit. Your mind amplifies your internal thoughts until they detach from you. You hear footsteps heavy behind you. You hear voices whispering through the vents. Voices that know your deepest secrets, your darkest shames. This isn't madness in the traditional sense. It is the brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. Create a simulation of reality. Except under solitary confinement, the simulation becomes a nightmare. The line between what is happening outside your eyes and what is happening inside your head dissolves entirely. You become a prisoner inside a phantom world of your own creation, locked in a room with your worst fears, and you cannot turn them off. Many people look at modern society and feel a desire to completely retreat. They see the noise, the digital distraction, and the superficiality of the world, and they romanticize absolute solitude. They call themselves lone wolves. They believe isolation is a sign of ultimate, untouchable strength. But solitary confinement exposes the fatal flaw in that philosophy. True independence is a myth. We are deeply, inextricably connected to the world around us. We need the touch of others, the sight of a far horizon, the unpredictability of nature, and the presence of human voices to keep our internal world anchored to sanity. Without an external baseline, the ego loses its gravity. It drifts into the void and shatters into 1,000 pieces. When individuals are finally released from long-term solitary confinement, they often find they can no longer function in the world they fought so hard to return to. When Sarah Shourd was finally released, she discovered that the open space of a normal street terrified her. For months, the presence of other people or the simple sound of a crowded room triggered immediate panic attacks and sensory overload. The brain has adapted to the box. It has optimized itself for nothingness. It has rewritten its wiring to survive a vacuum, and it cannot simply undo that damage. Once the mind adapts to the void, it is incredibly difficult to bring it back to the light. The next time you seek total isolation, remember the fragile architecture of the machine inside your head. Be careful what you wish for, because the mind is a beautiful place to visit, but you do not want to be trapped there alone.